Welcome, everybody. You're tuned in to the Gambling Grinder Podcast, brought to you by Z-Rep. That's Zia Rising Entertainment Productions. I am your host, Bobby Matthews. The purpose of the Gambling Grinders Podcast is to provide our viewers with valuable information. Information I've gathered throughout the fight week needed to give you the winning edge. Whether you're a beginner just trying to learn the basics of sports betting, or you're a downright degenerate who says, "Ooh, there are people throwing hands inside of a cage this weekend. I have got to get in on that." Maybe you're just a good old-fashioned mixed martial arts fan and you want to establish bragging rights or street cred amongst your friends and family. Then the Gambling Grinder Podcast has got something for you. Let's begin this edition of the Gambling Grinders Podcast. This for UFC Fight Night, Edwards versus Muhammad. You can stream the event live on ESPN Plus using the ESPN Plus app. It is taking place in the UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas, Nevada, March 13th, 2021. We'll be kicking things off with our main event of the evening. In the welterweight division, starting off with Leon Edwards. He comes into the fight owning a 18-3 professional record. He got there by getting 6 TKO victories, 3 submission victories, and 9 decision victories. His opponent, Belal Muhammad, he comes in owning a similar 18-3 professional record. He got there by getting 4 TKO victories, 1 submission victory, and 13 decision victories. So a lot of decisions between these two gentlemen. Let's take a look at the odds information. As always, on the Gambling Grinders Podcast, all odds information has been provided by MyBookie. MyBookie.ag, online betting made easy. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the odds here. The odds makers there at MyBookie have set Leon Edwards as a minus 270 favorite. His opponent, Belal Muhammad, comes in as a plus 220 underdog. The over-under is set at 4.5 rounds, with the over juiced to minus 195. The under is set at plus 160. Taking a look at these two, comparatively speaking, looks like Leon Edwards owns a slight height advantage over his opponent. They both made the weights. Looked good on the scales. Leon Edwards is ripped, and Belal Muhammad did the discount double check. Leon Edwards owns a slight reach advantage over Belal Muhammad. He also comes in with a southpaw stance. His opponent comes in with a natural orthodox stance. Leon Edwards is a little bit younger than his opponent, coming in at 29. Muhammad is 32. Let's take a look at their gyms. Leon Edwards trains out of UTC Birmingham, England. That's Ultimate Training Center in England. His opponent trains out of Rufus Sport, and he is from Palestine. He represents Palestine. Now, let's take a look at some trends and some stats information that you might need to be aware about before you bet on this fight. Leon Edwards comes into the fight riding a 8-fight winning streak. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 5-0 to the over 2.5 rounds. He has beaten the likes of RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, Gunnar Nelson, and Donald Cerrone. The last person he lost to was the champ of this division, Kamaru Usman. His opponent, Belal Muhammad, he comes into the fight riding a 4-fight win streak. He is also, in his last 5 fights, 5-0 to the over 2.5 rounds. He has beaten Diego Lima and lost to Jeff Neal. And let's move on down right to the co-main event of the evening, taking place in the lightweight division, starting off with Misha Cirkunov. He comes into the fight owning a 15-5 professional record. He got there by getting 4 TKO victories, 9 submission victories, and 2 decision victories. His opponent, Ryan Spann, he comes into the fight owning a 18-6 professional record, getting there by 4 TKO victories, 11 submission victories, and 3 decisions. Take a look at the odds here. The odds makers have Misha Cirkunov as a minus 130 favorite. His opponent Ryan Spann comes in as a plus money, plus 110 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set 1.5 rounds, with the over at plus money, plus 110, and the under is actually juiced to 140. So a lot of people thinking that this fight is not gonna go the distance, not gonna last long at all, according to the odds makers. We'll have to just see about that. All right, let's take a look at the two. Comparatively speaking, looks like Ryan Spann is going to have a slight height advantage. Ryan Spann barely missed weight at first. I understand that he did come back out on the scales and did eventually make the weight, but he did not look too good, I don't believe. Kind of looked like a schlub on the scales, if I'm being honest, which no disrespect to Mr. Spann. I am a massive schlub, idiot, moron, imbecile myself. Moving on. Ryan Spann also owns a slight reach advantage. Both of them come in with an orthodox stance. Misha Cirkunov is the elder statesman. Ryan Spann coming in at 29. Cirkunov is 34. Taking a look at their teams, where they train at. Misha trains at Extreme Couture. Ryan Spann trains at Fortis MMA. Misha Cirkunov is from Latvia, I do believe. I've never said that country's name before, so please forgive me. Like I said, I'm an idiot, moron, imbecile. Moving on. Ryan Spann is the American. Some stats, information, and trends to watch out for on this fight here. Misha Cirkunov is coming off a 2-year layoff. He hasn't fought since September 14th, 2019. In his last 5 fights, all 5 have gone under 1.5 rounds. He has beaten Jimmy Crute, and he has lost to Johnny Walker, Glover Teixeira, and Volkan Oezdemir. His opponent, he comes in right off a loss to Johnny Walker himself. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 3-2 to the under 1.5 rounds as well. He has beaten Smilin' Sam Alvey, D. Clark, and Nogueira. And like I said, he did lose to Johnny Walker in his last going. Continuing right along to our next fight of the evening, taking place in the featherweight division. Starting off with Dan Ige. He comes into this fight owning a 14-3 professional record, getting there with 3 TKO victories, 5 submission victories, and 6 decisions. His opponent, Gavin Tucker, he comes into this fight with a 13-1 professional record, getting there with 4 TKO victories, 6 submission victories, and 3 decision victories. Let's take a look at the odds information. The odds makers have Dan Ige as a minus 150 favorite. Gavin Tucker comes in as a plus 125 underdog. The over-under is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over being juiced to minus 260 and the under at plus 200. Take a look at their height here. Pretty even as far as height goes. They both made the weights. Looked good on the scales. Dan Ige is going to have a significant reach advantage over his opponent, a 5-inch reach advantage, despite them being similar in height, which is something to keep an eye out for if Dan Ige can utilize that reach advantage. They have opposing stances. Gavin Tucker is a southpaw. Dan Ige is the natural orthodox fighter. Dan Ige also comes in at the age of 29. Gavin Tucker is the Canadian is 34. Dan Ige trains at Extreme Couture, whereas his opponent Tucker trains at Titans MMA. Ige is the American fighter, and Gavin Tucker is the Canadian fighter. Let's take a look at some stats, trends, and information on this fight. Alright, let's see here. So, in the last 5 fights for Dan Ige, he is 4-1. He is coming into this fight off of a loss, a main event loss to Calvin Kattar. In his last 5 fights as well, he has gone 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds. Some notable opponents that he's beaten Edson Barboza and Bektik. Like I said, he did lose to Calvin Kattar in his last fight. His opponent, Gavin Tucker, he comes into this fight riding a 3-fight winning streak. He is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He is also 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds in his last 5 fights as well. Some notable opponents that Gavin Tucker has beaten is Brandon Quarantillo and Justin James. He did lose to Rick Glenn. Next up is a fight in the bantamweight division, beginning with Jonathan Martinez. He comes into this fight owning a 13-3 professional record, getting there with 7 TKO victories, 2 submission victories, and 4 decision victories. His opponent, Davey Grant, he comes into this fight owning a 12-4 professional record, with 2 TKO victories, 8 submission victories, and 2 decision victories. Taking a look at the odds here, the odds makers have labeled Jonathan Martinez as a -310 favorite, and Grant comes in as a +250 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over at -170, the under at +140. They both come in at a similar height of 5'8". They both weighed in at the bantamweight limit for Jonathan Martinez at 136, 135.5 for Davey Grant. Similar reach, 70 inches for Martinez, 69 for Grant. Martinez is the southpaw stance fighter. Grant is the natural orthodox fighter. Martinez is 26 years old. Davey Grant comes into the fight at the age of 35. Jonathan Martinez trains at Factory X Muay Thai, who hasn't been on the best run as of late. Davey Grant trains out of SBG Manchester. Martinez is the American, and Davey Grant is the Englishman. Going into some stats, trends, and info on this fight, Jonathan Martinez is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's coming in on a 2-fight win streak. He is also 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds. 3 of those overs have came by decision. He has beaten Thomas Almeida and recently lost to Andre Ewell. His opponent, Davey Grant, the Englishman. He's not like the Beatles, but he's English. He, in his last 5 fights, has gone 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds. 2 of those have been decisions, so he has the ability to finish late. Some notable wins. He has beaten Martin Day and G. Popov. He has lost to Manny Bermudez, recently, and D. Stasiak. The next fight we're going to cover is going to be in the flyweight division. Starting off with Manil Kape. He comes into this fight owning a 15-5 professional record, getting there with 8 TKO victories, 1 submission victory, and 4 decision victories. His opponent, Matthews Nicolau. He comes into this fight owning a 15-3-1 professional record, getting there by 4 TKO victories, 5 submissions, 1 decision, and 1 draw. Taking a look at their odds, the odds makers have Manil Kape listed as a minus 135 favorite. Matthews Nicolau is listed as a plus 115 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over being ever so slightly juiced to minus 130, and we have the under at plus 100, or even money. Taking a look at some discrepancies here, they look pretty even across the board. They both made weights. Manil Kape does own a slight reach advantage of 2 inches, 68 inches compared to 66. Manil Kape is also the southpaw stance fighter. Nicolau is the right-handed orthodox fighter. Similar in age, Kape is 27, Nicolau is 28. Manil Kape trains out of AKA Thailand. It's American Kickboxing Thailand, and it also says on Tapology that he represents Versus team. Matthews Nicolau trains out of Nova União, that's in Brazil. Manil Kape represents Portugal, is where he is born and raised. Matthews Nicolau is the Brazilian fighter. Taking a look at some stats and information on this fight here. Manil Kape actually lost his UFC debut. He lost to Alejandro Pantoja. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 3-2 to the over 2.5 rounds. 2 of those fights have been decisions. Matthews Nicolau, this is, I believe, his second chance in UFC. He's had a couple of fights, went away for a while, and now he has returned. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 4-1. He has also won the Ultimate Fighter 23. Some notable victories for Matthews Nicolau. He has beaten Luis Smolka in a unanimous decision. And he won 2 fights outside of the UFC. His last loss came by D. Ortiz. Up next is the fight in the middleweight division, beginning with Eric, your boy, Anders. He comes into this fight owning a 13-5 professional record, getting there with 8 TKO victories, 1 submission victory, and 4 decision victories. His opponent, Darren Stewart, he comes into this fight owning a 12-6 professional record. He got there by getting 7 TKO victories, 1 submission victory, and 5 decision victories. The odds makers have Eric Anders as a plus 155 underdog, and Darren Stewart comes in as a minus 180 favorite. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, and the over has been juiced to minus 220. The under is now set at plus 180. Let's look at some discrepancies here. Pretty even. As far as height goes, they both were able to make the weight. Nothing to report about here. Looked good on the scales. On the reach, Anders does have a 1-inch reach advantage, with which I don't know if that means anything, but there it is. Anders is also the southpaw. A lot of southpaw fighters in this event tonight. Stewart is the orthodox stance fighter. Anders is 33 years of age. Stewart is slightly younger, coming in at 30 years old. Eric Anders trains at Spartan Fitness. Darren Stewart trains out of MMA Clinic. Eric Anders is the United States of American. And Darren Stewart is an Englishman. Going into some stats and trends to watch out for on this fight. Eric Anders is coming off a 2-fight losing streak, so keep that in mind. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds. 4-1 to the over. All 4 have gone to decisions. He has beaten Gerald Meerschaert and lost to Khalil Roundtree. His opponent, Darren Stewart, he too is coming off a loss to Kevin Holland. And in his last 5 fights, he is 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds as well, with all 4 coming by way of decision. He has beaten Maki Pitolo and Darren Wynn. As I alluded to earlier, he did lose to Kevin Holland in a split decision. And he did lose to Fabiniski outside of the UFC in 2020. And that brings us to the prelims main event taking place in the women's strawweight division. Starting off with Angela Overkill Hill. She comes into this fight owning a 12-9 professional record, getting there by 5 TKO victories. She has 0 submissions and has 7 decision victories under her belt. Her opponent, Ashley Yoder, she comes into this fight owning a 8-6 professional record with 0 TKO victories, 4 submission victories, and 4 decision victories. Taking a look at the odds, Angela Hill comes into this fight as a minus 370 favorite. Ashley Yoder comes into the fight as a plus 290 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over being juiced to minus 390 and the under set at plus 315. Ashley Yoder is the taller fighter. She is 5'7" compared to Angela Hill's 5'3". They both came in at the strawweight limit of 116 pounds. Ashley Yoder is going to have a significant reach advantage. Ashley Yoder holds a 69-inch reach compared to Hill's 64.5 reach. Angela Hill is the orthodox stance fighter. Ashley Yoder is the southpaw stance fighter. I can speak correctly. Angela Hill is 32 years old. Yoder comes into the fight at 33. Angela Hill represents Alliance MMA. Ashley Yoder trains out of Team Quest. They are both American-born girls, and we are hoping for excitement and fireworks in this one. Ashley Yoder, in fact, has beaten Angela Hill in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how this one shakes out. Taking a look at some stats and information, Angela Hill is coming into this fight riding a 2-fight losing streak. She has also gone 5-0 in her last 5 fights to the over 2.5 rounds, with 3 of those coming by way of decision. Some notable fights: she has beaten Look Boonmi, Hannah Cyphers. She has recently lost split decision heartbreakers to Michelle Watterson and Claudia Gadelia. Ashley Yoder, on the other hand, she is coming off a win, and in her last 5 fights, she has gone 5-0 to the over 2.5 rounds. Some notable fights: she has beaten Miranda Granger, and she has lost to Liviana Souza and Randa Marcos. Next, we're going to be previewing a featherweight fight, starting off with Charles Jourdain. He comes into this fight owning a 10-3 professional record, getting there with 7 TKO victories, 3 submission victories, and 0 decisions. He has lost every decision that he has come. The judges do not like him. His opponent, on the other hand, Marcelo Rojo, he comes into this fight owning a 16-7 professional record. He got there by getting 8 TKO victories, 6 submission victories, and 2 decision victories. The odds makers have Charles Jourdain as a minus 260 favorite. Marcelo Rojo comes in as a plus 210 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over at minus 110, which would be technically the underdog, and the under is set at minus 120, so that just goes to show you that the odds makers do not know what to think about the over-under in this fight. We'll see if we can give you some stats and information that could help give you the winning edge on that situation. Let's first compare them, starting off with their heights. Pretty even, 5'9" versus 5'8". From Jourdain to Rojo, they both came in at 145.5 pounds. Jourdain has a 69-inch reach. I could not find any correct stats or information on the reach for Marcelo Rojo, so we'll have to get that during the tell of the tape when the fight goes down. Jourdain is a switch stance fighter, so he is equally as effective on his orthodox fighting stance as his southpaw fighting stance. Jourdain is the younger fighter at 25. Rojo is 32. Charles Jourdain trains out of Academy Pro Star MMA, and that is indeed how it is spelled. I double-checked on ESPN and Tapology. Marcelo trains out of Entram Gym. I have not heard of that one. Charles Jourdain is the Canadian going up against the Argentinian. Take a look at some stats and information on here. Charles Jourdain looks like he's coming in on a win one, lose one trend potentially. And he came in off a loss. So is he due for a win? We'll just have to see. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds. So he is an over fighter. He has beaten Di Choi and lost to Andre Fili. That is the last fight he had where he lost. Andre Fili beat him. His opponent, Marcelo Rojo, he is making his UFC debut. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 4-1 to the under 1.5 rounds. So we got a battle of finishers and grinders on here, which is why they have the odds for the over-under so even. I wouldn't blame you if you took a stab at the over. But you really couldn't go wrong either way. Good luck. Again, to reiterate, before we continue on with our bantamweight division fight here, the purpose of the Gambling Grinders podcast is to grind out this information and provide you, our viewers, with valuable information needed to give you the winning edge. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, if so-and-so hits him harder, then he should definitely win. I mean, that is not a good breakdown or good analysis. If he doesn't hit him hard enough and he doesn't win, what part of that was good information? So the point here at Gambling Grinders podcast is to give you that information to influence you to make the best picks for yourself. We do in fact have a picks portion at the end of the show. If you want to stick around and join us for that, you're more than welcome to follow or fade our picks. But I am not going to tell you how to spend your money. In fact, I would rather provide you with free information that could possibly win you money instead of tell you who's going to win, and then you watch them lose, and you're wondering what the fuck just happened. So that is what I'm trying to do here at the Gambling Grinders podcast. Let's continue on with the bantamweight division fight. Starting off with Ronnie Yahya. He comes into this fight owning a 26-10-1 professional record, getting there with 0 TKO victories, 20 submission victories, and 6 decision victories. 20 submissions. Moving on to his opponents. Ray Rodriguez. He comes into this fight owning a 16-7 professional record, getting there with 3 TKO victories, 8 submission victories, and 5 decision victories. The odds makers have Ronnie Yahya as a minus 300 favorite. Ray Rodriguez comes in as a plus 240 underdog. The over-under is set at 1.5 rounds, with the over being juiced to minus 150, the under at plus 120. Taking a look at these two, they both were able to make weight. They have similar heights. Ray Rodriguez is going to have a reach advantage. Rodriguez has a 71 reach compared to Ronnie Yahya's 67 reach advantage. They both come in with an orthodox stance. Ronnie Yahya comes in at the 36 years old. Rodriguez is 33. And you know how these bantamweights, they usually lose a lot of speed as they go older. But they're both fairly old, and Ronnie Yahya is a submission machine. Yahya trains out of Constrictor Team. Ray Rodriguez trains out of Brazilian Top Team. Ronnie Yahya is the Brazilian. Ray Rodriguez is the American fighter. Going into some stats information on this one here. Yahya is 3-2 to the over in his last 5 fights. His last loss was to Ricky Simone, which was a unanimous decision. His opponent, Ray Rodriguez, he is 3-2 to the under 2.5 rounds. He has lost to Brian Kelleher in a submission on his UFC debut. Next up is our lightweight bouts. Starting off with Nasrat Haqparast. He is coming into this fight owning a 12-3 professional record with 9 TKO victories, 0 submissions, and 3 decision victories. His opponent, Rafa Garcia. He comes into this fight owning a 12-0 perfect record. He got there by getting 1 TKO victory, 7 submission victories, and 4 decision victories. The odds makers have Haqparast as a minus 400 favorite. Garcia comes in as a plus 310 underdog. The over-under was not listed when I made this video, so we're just going to move on. Haqparast is going to be the taller man, owning a 3-inch height advantage. They both made the lightweight weight limit at 156. Haqparast had to use the blocker thing to strip down and make the weight, but he did make the weight nonetheless. Moving on to their reach, Haqparast does own a significant 4-inch reach. Yes, 4-inch reach advantage. Haqparast is also a southpaw stance fighter. Garcia is an orthodox stance fighter. Similar in age, Haqparast is 25. Garcia coming in at 26. Haqparast trains out of TriStar Gym. Rafa Garcia trains out of Team Punisher. He is the Afghanistani fighter, Haqparast. Rafa Garcia is the Mexican fighter, training out of Mexico. Some stats and information to keep an eye out for this fight. Haqparast has been known to blow it on multiple times when he's a major favorite, so buyer beware if you're leaning on Haqparast. In his last 5 fights, he has gone 3-2 to the over 2.5 rounds, with all 3 of those have gone to decision. He has beaten Munoz, and he has lost to Drew Dober. His opponents, Rafael Garcia, he is making his UFC debut. He made his name for himself on the Mexican regional scene, and in his last 5 fights, he has gone 3-2 to the under 2.5 rounds. That brings us to our women's flyweight division fights, beginning off with Courtney Casey. She comes into this fight owning a 9-8 professional record, getting there with 3 TKO victories, 4 submission victories, and 2 decision victories. Her opponent, JJ Aldrich, she comes into this fight owning a 8-4 professional record, getting there with 2 TKO victories, 0 submission victories, and 7 decisions. That can't be right. I believe it is 6-2 decision ratio. I'll have to double check that. Either way, she has more decisions than finishes. Moving on to the odds. Courtney Casey comes in as the plus 125 underdog. JJ Aldrich comes in as the minus 150 favorite. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over being juiced all the way up to minus 435, and the under at plus 335. Taking a look at their height here, Courtney Casey does have a slight height advantage. They both were able to make weights. Aldridge didn't look too great on the scales. She looked like she was kind of just going through the motions, potentially. Courtney Casey, on the other hand, came out looking great. She was jacked, gave a big flex, big smile, ready to go for this fight. Pretty similar reach advantage, 67 to 67.5 inches for JJ Aldridge. Courtney Casey is a natural orthodox fighter. Aldridge is the southpaw stance fighter. Courtney Casey is 33 years old. Aldridge comes in at 28. Courtney Casey trains out of MMA Lab. Aldridge, Freedom Fighters is her training affiliation. And they are both American-born ladies. Some stats and information to watch out for this fight here. So, Courtney Casey, it looks like she is coming in on a win one, lose one, win one, lose one streak, and she's coming in off of a loss. So, fingers crossed that she keeps that trend going and wins. Her opponent, JJ Aldridge, in her last 5 fights, has gone 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds, with all 4 of those making it to decision. And Courtney Casey has beaten Angela Hill and lost to Michelle Watterson and Cynthia Calvillo. JJ Aldrich lost a close split decision to Sabina Mazzo and has beaten Polyana Vienna. So this is a very exciting fight. Can't wait to watch this one. Go Courtney! Now we have our final women's fight of the evening. This one taking place in the strawweight division. Starting off with Gloria De Paula. She comes into this fight owning a 5-2 professional record, getting there with 3 TKO victories, 0 submissions, and 2 decision victories. Her opponent, Jin Yu Fry. Jin Yu Fry. She comes into this fight owning a 9-6 professional record, getting there with 1 TKO victory, 2 submission victories, and 6 decision victories. The odds makers have Gloria DePaula as a minus 190 favorite. Jin Yu Frey comes into the fight as a plus 160 underdog. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over juiced all the way up to minus 360. The under now set at plus 285. Taking a look at these ladies, comparatively speaking, DePaula is going to have a slight 2-inch height advantage. They both were able to make this straw weight of 115. Jin Yu Frey at 115.5 pounds. Gloria DePaula will also have a slight reach advantage of 2 inches. Gloria DePaula comes in as a orthodox stance fighter. Jin Yu Frey is a southpaw stance fighter. There is a 10-year age gap difference between these two. Jin Yu Frey comes in at 35 years of age. Gloria DePaula comes in at 25. She trains out of Shootbox, does Gloria DePaula. Jin Yu Frey trains out of Genesis BJJ. DePaula is the Brazilian woman. Jin Yu Frey is the American woman. Getting into some stats and information on this fight here. Gloria DePaula, she comes into this fight riding a 2-fight winning streak. She is also 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds, with 3 of those coming by decision. Her opponent, Jin Yu Frey, she is 0-2 in the UFC. She is hoping to win at least one. Her back is against the cage, so to speak. She is also 4-1 to the over 2.5 rounds, with all 4 going to decision. She recently lost to Kay Hansen. Pretty exciting fight. Cannot wait to see this one. And that brings us to the final fight of the evening. This one taking place in the welterweight division. Starting off with Matthew Semselberger. Forgive my pronunciation. He comes into this fight with a 7-2 professional record, with 4 TKO victories, 1 submission victory, and 2 decision victories. His opponent, Jason Witt, he comes into this fight with a 18-6 professional record, with 3 TKO victories, 8 submission victories, and 6 decision victories. The odds makers have Matthew Semselberger as a minus 125 favorite. Jason Witt is a slight underdog at plus 105. The over-under on this fight is set at 2.5 rounds, with the over now at minus 120 and the under at minus 110. Taking a look at these two, comparatively speaking, Semselberger will be the bigger fighter at 6'1" compared to 5'10". Witt came in slightly heavier. He made the welterweight limit at 171. Semselberger came in slightly under at 169.5 pounds. Matthew will also have a 5-inch reach advantage. He is also a switch stance fighter, and Witt is the natural orthodox stance fighter. Semselberger is the age of 28. Jason Witt comes into the fight at the age of 34. Matthew Semselberger trains at the Clinch Academy gym. Jason Witt trains out of Glory MMA. Matthew's the United States American, and so is Jason Witt. We got 2 Americans going at it. Some stats and info to watch out for this fight. Matthew Semselberger, the Semi-Jedi, he comes into this fight riding a 4-fight win streak. He is also 3-2 to the over 2.5 rounds, with all 3 going to decision. He beat C- during his UFC debut, and his opponent is coming off a win. His opponent, Jason Witt, is coming off a win. He is also 1-1 in the UFC and hasn't beat anyone that I would say is notable on here. And that should do it for this fight. I do hope that this provided some insight to you on who you're going to pick, and you got some information that you might not have gotten otherwise just by watching this video. If you got any information on this video and you enjoyed your time spent watching it, I would appreciate any like, comment, or subscription. There are buttons down there on the bottom. They do like to be pushed, so don't neglect them. Go push them. Thanks. Now, let's go to our picks portion of the show. Okay, so before we move on to the picks for this week, let's recap our picks from last week because we try to keep everything transparent here. I am not going to come on this show and be like, oh, now this guy should definitely win. I mean, if he hits him harder and he keeps him down and scores the bigger damage, there's no reason why he shouldn't win. But is he going to do that? I mean, we've seen that, we've heard that, and it doesn't provide any information to us as bettors, which is why I began this show to provide you with the basic information that you might need to make the best bet for yourself. Based on the information that I have gathered, I release my picks, and let's see how we did last week. Last week for UFC 259, I released picks for every single fight, and we went 11-4. We missed out on Song Yadong. We missed out on Liviana Souza. We missed out on Elon Cruz, and Mario Bautista blew it for us. Other than that, we hit at 11-4, which is not too bad out of 15 fights. Our best bets section, we gave away Song Yadong as one of our best bets. He did not make it. Sean Brady did, however, come through for us. Kai Kara France pulled it through at the very end. Thanks, brother. On our underdogs, we hit on our underdogs. Tim Elliott was a hit on us. Jan Blachowicz was a major hit for us. We saw that coming a mile away. And Liviana Souza blew it for us. So, on our parlay plays, we lost on all 3 parlay plays. I recommend don't play parlays. All right, now let's release our picks for this week. This for UFC Fight Night, Edwards versus Muhammad. Starting off with the main event, I'm going to go with Leon Edwards. I'm also going to go with Misha Cirkunov. We're going to lean with Dan Ige, Jonathan Martinez. We're going to go with Matthews Nicolau. We're going to go with Eric, your boy, Anders. We're also going to go with a big underdog here, Ashley Yoder. The greasy theory on that one is perhaps Angela Hill is 1 foot in the octagon, 1 foot out of the octagon. She has a promising career waiting for her in broadcasting. Really big fan of Angela Hill. Don't want to see her lose, but from a gambling perspective, I do think there is some value on Yoder. She's my biggest underdog that I've played on in a while. We're also going to pick Charles Jourdain. We're going to go with Ronnie Yaya. We're also going to pick Rafa Garcia, another big underdog, unlikely to win, but we're hoping that Nasrat Haqparast blows it as he has a history of doing. We're going to pick Courtney Casey. We're also going to pick Gloria De Paula. In our final fights, Matthew Semselberger. So we got a good mixture of favorites and dogs that we're going with this week here. We're going to hope that 3 out of the 4 payouts, at least 2 out of the 4 we're hoping for. So our best bet section here, we're going to go with Semselberger as our best bet here. We're also going to go with Misha Serganov as another one of our best bets. We're going to lean on Leon Edwards as another one of our best bets, and Charles Jourdain as another best bet, and that's for our favorites. Our favorites only. So when we go into our underdogs here, we have a few underdogs that we like. We have that Matthew Nicolau, Courtney Casey, Ashley Yoder, and Eric Anders. So we're hoping that we can go 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4 on these best bets here and profit. This week's parlays, we ain't got none. I don't recommend doing parlays unless you're nasty. Unless you real nasty.